songs of this nature, we'll have students that will volunteer to play in a small group and demonstrate the song first, and then the whole band will join it. So we have a lot of brave souls here playing in a small group. Timpani and learn triangle, tambourine, all those other instruments throughout the course of the year. So let's do, how about Merrily We Roll On? So Merrily We Roll On is going to feature our blow instruments. I am blessed as a band teacher to have 8 trombonists. Any other band teacher would die to have that many trombonists. And I'm very lucky that I have such a wonderful trombone section. So they're going to demonstrate in a small group. Merrily We Roll Along, and then the rest of the kids will join in. 1, So this is going to be our rendition of Good King Wenceslas, and it will be led by a small group of musicians as well. audience. This is really the first time they've played in front of anyone, so they're doing stellar tonight. So I'm really, really So we're going to end with Jingle Bells. This is by far their absolute favorite song. So this is Jingle Bells. Thank you so much. Have a pleasant evening.
Back door?
Oh no.
That thing will not be
Matt, I think Herb showed it, but he's going there to say. Just having a backup. Oh, all right. Once you learn how to back up, what kind of Miss Kurt and the principal did it because she has underlings like us. Hey, doing it for her. I can't judge her. That's what she said. She was like, yeah, thank you. But anyways, thank you. All set. Wait. Right. Oh, the kids.
You should have my shirt on your shirt. Work? Just pass them over to me. If those
Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order and welcome you to the Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District School Committee meeting. It is 6:30 p.m. I see that Wilbraham Public Access Channel is recording. Is there anyone else here recording this meeting? We will do roll call in alphabetical order. Bill Bontempi. Cheryl Caruana. Here. Sean Kennedy.
Here.
Patrick Kiernan.
Present.
Lisa Murray. Here. Maura Ryan. Absent this evening. And Michelle Boudreau, myself, here. If you would please stand. Patrick, will you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do have the need for executive session. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 1, to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health, rather than professional competence of an individual, or to discuss the discipline or dismissal of, or complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call. Cheryl.
Aye.
Sean.
Aye.
Patrick.
Aye.
Lisa. Aye. Myself, aye. We're now moving to executive session. We're going to the library.
Room 60.
16.
Should be ready.
So we will continue with our city rep report. Molly Burton.
Hello. This past Sunday, Student Council hosted an event for the children of the teachers at Minichog where they played drafts and Santa came. Tomorrow is Ugly Sweater Day, and Student Council will be collecting donations for the Toys for Joy organization. I'll be participating, be excited. The Sunday formal also happened with a good turnout. Minichog also had their art and music show recently. But don't worry if you missed it. There's one in February. I just enjoy Latin music. Boys basketball is playing today, and the swim and wrestling teams have been doing well, so I've heard. Spanish Club has made holiday cards for children at Alianza in Holyoke, which is a women's shelter. That should be going out before Christmas. The French Club had prom due Friday. Minichog's chorus sang at Bright Nights, and they did a small performance at Hampton House, opposite Hampton, which I believe went well. Minichog's mock law team is going to be competing soon, I believe in January and February. And a little further out, the Model Congress and Model United Nations groups will be attending conferences in March. And that's everything I've got.
Yeah.
The school graduates, do we participate in that this year?
We do have a schools match with group. I believe that's a little bit later in the year, but I can't like give 100%. But I know that there is a group.
Okay, thank you.
I think our camera person was confirming that.
Excellent.
She did it. Not easy.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Enjoy your break.
Me too.
Did you hear back from Gordon yet?
Oh, yeah, it's rejection.
Oh.
Don't worry. I don't mind. I've got nowhere to go.
Good.
I applied for colleges on a whim, too. They were free, so we'll see.
All right. Keep us informed.
I will, I'll let you know.
Good one. So we'll turn it over to the superintendent. For new business, we'll begin with the U.S. News and World Report.
Thank you very much. So Aaron, if you could advance to the first slide. As you know, U.S. News and World Report provides rankings for a number of things, including cars, colleges, hospitals, states, and since 2007, American high schools. In 2021, U.S. News also began ranking elementary and middle schools. To their credit, they provide a reasonable amount of methodological transparency explaining the process they go through to come up with the rankings. In my opinion, they don't do such a good job of explaining the rationale for their selection and weighting of ranking factors, but they do show their work, so you can understand most of what goes into the rankings. Tonight, I'll walk you through the ranking models to help you understand our school rankings and the factors contributing to those rankings. To begin with, I want you to conceptualize the system as two mathematical models applied to three groups of schools. The same ranking factors are used for both elementary and middle schools, but the two groups are treated separately and not ranked against each other. Just separating all of the non-high schools into elementary and middle school turns out to be one of the biggest challenges of the system. While almost all high schools are organized as four-year programs inclusive of grades 9 through 12, and most middle schools serve grades 6 through 8, there are many grade configurations for the grades pre-K through 5. In our district alone, there are 4 schools serving those grades, and each one has a different configuration. Some schools, such as Mile Tree, do not serve tested grades in the statewide assessment system, so they're excluded from ranking. Others, such as Stony Hill and Sewell Roll, only include some of the elementary grades. And some schools end up being classified as elementary schools even though they have students from the middle school grades. This is because the ranking system requires each elementary and middle school to belong to one and only one group. So when a school includes students from both elementary and middle school grades, it's classified as an elementary school if the majority of test takers are in grades K through 5, and in middle school if the majority of test takers are in grades 6 through 8. We don't have to look any farther than the boundaries of our own district to see that elementary comparisons are not always apples to apples. As I've already said, Mile Tree has no tested grades, so it's unranked. Stony Hill's ranking is based on 3rd grade MCAS scores. Sewell Road's ranking is based on 4th and 5th grade MCAS scores. And Green Meadow is grouped with elementary schools, but its ranking is based on grades 3 through 8 MCAS results. And ours is not the only district where this takes place. There are many other combinations of tested grades in elementary schools across the state. It's important to understand that the elementary schools are ranked against each other based on their state assessment results, even though they don't all administer the same tests. It's also important to note that only math and reading proficiency contribute to the ranking. Science proficiency is not included in the ranking model. So, after schools are sorted into 2 groups, the same model is applied in both elementary and middle. Actual performance on math and reading each contribute 25% to the ranking. The other 50% of the ranking is a little more mysterious. The language on the slide comes directly from U.S. News and contains all I've been able to find about that half of the performance rating. What we can tell from this is that half of the ranking is based on the school's actual performance as compared to how U.S. News expected them to perform. But we don't know what the modeled expectations for each school are. This tells us that U.S. News predicts test results for each school and essentially awards bonus points for those schools that cover the spread and deducts points from schools that don't. So 50%, once again, of the ranking is based on the amount that a school exceeded or fell short of its predicted outcomes, and 50% is based on the actual outcomes. And we also know that bonus points are not awarded in a linear relationship. As the language on the slide explains, a 10-point positive difference in the top end of the distribution earns more bonus points than a 10-point positive distribution in the middle. So, let's see how we did. This chart depicts the most recent U.S. News state rankings for the 3 ranked elementary schools in our district, as well as their reading proficiency and math proficiency rank. That's the rank that's based on whether or not they are at or above the expectation that U.S. News had for them. And the U.S. News reserves its best schools distinction for those in the top third of the distribution, which would be those below the red line here. Note that the 2021 rank is based on a 3-year average of MCAS scores going back to 2018. This means their rankings are a very lagging indicator based on a 3-year look-back period. Based on that, I think Stony Hill should be in good shape to receive this honor again because their scores in 2022, which weren't even included in this model, are higher than they were in 2020. So that's a year that we'll be dropping off in a 3-year look-back period. The proficiency ranks are essentially the actual school ranks based on MCAS. For the 3-year look-back, Stony Hill was in the top third of schools for reading, and both Stony Hill and Green Meadows were in the top third for math. However, as I explained, those ranks account for only half of the final ranking. Stony Hill exceeded the predicted scores, so they were awarded some bonus points in the final ranking, which is the first column. However, their final ranking was lower than their actual rankings on reading and math, which can only mean that other schools were awarded even more bonus points than Stony Hill was. Green Meadow and Sewell Road were somewhat below their predicted proficiency, so they were penalized by the ranking algorithm, most notably at Sewell Road, which was dropped between 150 and 200 spots from their actual performance based on missing the predicted score. So before I go on to middle school, I guess I would just ask, are there any questions about what I said so far?
Yeah, the red line that you have on it, that's their expected result?
No, that's the cut point between the top third, which would be the scores below, because you start ranking with 1. So in order to be one of the best of schools, you have to be below the red line.
Okay. All right.
Anything else on elementary? Okay. Okay, moving on to middle school model. Wilbraham Middle School was ranked against 491 other Massachusetts middle schools based on the same 3-year look-back period. Again, the red line represents the cut point between the top third of schools and the rest of the distribution. You can see that WMS was in the top third of middle schools with respect to reading proficiency and met the predicted score for reading. It just missed being in the top third of performance for mathematics and was somewhat below the predicted score for math. Like Stony Hill and Green Meadows, the final rank was below the actual performance rank on either assessment, in this case mostly because of the penalty assessed for not meeting the predicted score in mathematics. And we're going to switch models in a second. Okay. So now I'll transition to the high school. So I'd ask you to just sort of reset your mathematical thinking because it's a completely different methodology used for the high school. And the largest single component is AP or IB participation by 12th graders. 30% of the score is based on the percentage of 12th graders taking at least one AP exam. This component is weighted so that passing at least one exam carries 3 times the value of just taking an exam. Another 10% of the ranking is based on the percentage of 12th graders taking and passing more than one AP or IB exam. So 40% of the whole ranking model is based on AP or IB participation by 12th graders. Another 40% is based on MCAS. In a fashion similar to the elementary school, the MCAS component is based in part on how well the school actually did, and in part on how well the school did as compared to how U.S. News expected the school to perform. And I find this next part truly problematic and potentially hurtful to our students and families, so I want to make it clear that the following words come from U.S. News, not from me. But they say 20% of the ranking is based on how the school's performance compared to U.S. News' expectations. Quote, given the proportion of students who are Black, Hispanic, or from low-income families. Close quote. I can't let that stand. without saying it's not okay for us to have different expectations for students based on their race, ethnicity, or family income, but that's part of the model. Our strategic plan affirms a commitment to the success of all students, and that's what the next component of the formula is, because it pushes us towards, because 10% of the ranking is based on reducing gaps between Black, Hispanic, and low-income students and their peers who do not fall into that category. The final 10% is graduation. So, here you have the overall rank, again in the first row, column, I should say, and the ranking factors that went into Minichog's most recent grading. There are 378 identified Massachusetts high schools in 2022, so the top third would be the top 126 spots. Again, state proficiency is based on a 3-year look-back period, and Minichog's actual proficiency placed it in the top third of Massachusetts high schools. However, its adjusted performance was 110 spots lower. That's because this ranking factor is based on the racial, ethnic, and economic status of students rather than their actual performance. So a way of thinking of that, this isn't exactly statistically the truest way to say this, but I think gives a sense of how to account for the difference between the actual proficiency and the adjusted performance. Essentially what they're saying is if the enrollment of Minichog mirrored the student demographics of the entire state, they would expect it to be closer to 250 rather than to the place where they came out. So that's sort of the penalty that the school will continue to be charged with in this model as long as its enrollment is relatively less diverse than the overall enrollment of the state. So the other two components, the AP-based components of the formula, trail by 2 years rather than 3 years. So the college readiness and college curriculum breadth factors are based on the proportion of students who took one or more tests in 2019-2020, and the new rankings that come out in the spring will be based on the proportion of students who took one or more AP tests 2 years ago. And so again, you can see the college readiness was just below the 200 mark there. We had about 30% of 12th graders taking at least one AP exam that year. That I just looking, sort of eyeballing where the schools were that fell below that red line in the top third. Most of them had about 40% of their 12th graders taking at least one AP exam, and a lot of them had 50% or more taking one AP exam. And then the curriculum breadth, of course, is based on the number of 12th graders who are taking more than one. So this gives you a sense of the various rankings, how they were obtained and what they signify. Some important points to remember are: 1, the elementary school rankings are subject to the greatest variance in what is actually being compared, because scores from grades 3 through 8 all end up being treated as elementary test scores for some schools. 2, these are trailing indicators. The state assessment data is from a 3-year look-back period, and the AP data lags by 2 years. Next, performance relative to statistically forecast achievement accounts for as much as actual student performance on state assessments. Next, the achievement on statewide science assessments is not a ranking factor at any school. And finally, almost half of the high school ranking is based on the percentage of 12th grade students who participate in AP testing and pass one or more tests. So the only way to influence rankings at the elementary and middle school level is to improve performance in ELA and math, which is something we're already accountable to through the state assessment system. At the high school level, there are 4 ways to improve the ranking. First is to improve MCAS scores, which again is something we're committed to doing through our state accountability system. However, we'll continue to take a big penalty on the adjusted performance as long as our enrollment demographics remain the same, as long as we remain less diverse than the state as a whole. A second way of increasing our ranking would be to increase the diversity of our high school population so that we don't pay that heavy penalty in the adjustment. Third way to increase the ranking would be to increase the graduation rate. However, that already stands at 98.3%, so there's limited upside potential there. And the fourth way to increase the ranking is to increase the percentage of 12th graders taking at least one AP exam and the percentage of 12th graders passing more than one AP exam. Those two factors, again, account for 40% of the ranking. However, unlike the other ranking factors in both models, those are based on educational market choices made by students. Currently, there's no requirement that 12th graders take AP courses or that they take the exam if they're enrolled in AP courses. And most 12th graders are not participating in AP classes, even though our district offers quite a lot of them. So the question this raises is whether we should respect student choices as educational consumers or do something to create demand for AP, such as subsidizing the cost of tests, more aggressively marketing AP classes through the guidance process, or offering other inducements such as flexible scheduling for 12th graders who enroll in AP classes. And with your agreement, we could try one or all of these strategies to see if we could increase the percentage of 12th graders taking and passing an AP course. However, the only caution I have about that is it's not something that's in the strategic plan. We just went through this process of trying to identify what the most important things were in the communities we served. And there's a list of 100 things, but no one said try to get more 12th graders taking AP classes. If we think AP is something that most or all 12th graders should do, we could rearrange the school and the system in order to try to get closer to that goal. But if we're doing it just for the ranking, that could be the tail wagging the dog. I guess I would just say the real question here is, do we think that AP is the most valuable experience for 12th grade students? If we think it is, then we should reorganize so that we can boost the factor, which will boost the ranking. But we should do that even if it wasn't a ranking factor. If we don't think that AP needs to have that much weight in the performance, or in the options that we offer for students, then we should just be clear to the community about what the model is valuing and explain why we're not pushing to maximize that points on AP. So that's a value choice, and that is a decision where I think the committee can give some guidance. But I think it's important to understand exactly, what's being valued and what's not being valued when we have a discussion about what the rankings are and how we got to those rankings. That's all I have on that.
Questions?
Sure. Yeah, so if I hear you correctly, I mean, the diversity portion of that methodology to me is incredibly troublesome in that it's essentially, it's incredibly racist to basically make the assumption that students who are black or brown would drag down your test scores. That being said, you said the committee could be helpful with this, and I think the committee has to be guiding on this. This is our job. We are district-wide policy makers. And so I think the real discussion, I don't think we're going to hit on it tonight, but I think it's something that we really need to talk about and have a more robust communication and conversation with people in the town, is where are we going as a district as far as education is concerned? The most sought-after component of education that we heard about in public listening sessions through the strategic plan was vocational training. So when you talk about, is it valuable for a 12th grader to take an AP class, my question is well, what's that kid going to do, right? Because if that kid is planning on joining the workforce and is not planning on attending college, then doing an AP class would have little to no impact on, on what it is that he's planning on doing in the future. The idea of the AP class, and I would say that the heavy reliance on AP for their rankings is entirely justified because it's the only way that you can get any type of, any type of normalization of curriculum, pace, scope, and rigor in terms of what classes offer. So just because I took, Miss Barnaby's, 11th grade poetry class, and it's a real hard class, but that has no bearing on, how you can rank one school versus the other. The other question that I ask, and this is when people come up to me and they ask me, and I don't have an answer, is we went from, I think we were in the 130s like 3 years ago. We dropped like 30 spots. And so the question that I put out to not only you, but to the community, to the rest of the members of the committee is, are we going to chase rankings or not? Because I think it has a very large, I think that's really the question that we need to pose to everybody is if we're going to chase rankings, then we have to set up how we're educating kids a lot differently. If we're not going to chase rankings, then we can't jump on board when, Stony Hill gets ranked in the top third of elementary schools and everybody cheers, but then, kind of whistle a happy tune and look the other way when Minichog doesn't, right? So I have, I have feelings about it, but I think the bigger question is where we're going as a district. And finally, the last thing I'm going to say is that we always talk about that Minichog is an amazing high school, and I might have a daughter there. I know she has some very good experiences there. But when we talk about the HWRSD, we say HW is an outstanding school district. The only thing that I can say is that we really do not have any objective data that lends credence to that. And I'm not saying that to be mean or critical. I'm saying that because I think we have a great school district. But when you ask me for data that would support that, I can't provide you with those data points. So when I look at rankings and I see U.S. News and World Reports, well, yeah, there's some things that will ding us, but crimes, we're ranked below Frontier, Greenfield, Ware. So, the bigger question that I would ask is, as we dig down into this is, what is happening overall, and how is it that you can have, school districts that we would look almost, down our noses at, but at the same time, when it comes to a ranking like this, we are actually lower than that. And so I have a hard time when I have constituents come up to me, and it's more often than it's comfortable, and they ask me those questions, and I can't answer them. I appreciate the breakdown on this. The only thing that was that when you talked about the racial diversity piece, but it still only ranks 10% weight on this. So when you've got 90% of the ranking is based on other factors, including AP, I guess I have a hard time, and I'd love to see their math to figure out how exactly they factor that in. And is the diversity piece, like the more diverse you are, the more it impacts, or is it, is there like a threshold that you reach and then pass that threshold? So, I think there's a lot of questions, but I really do. I think the question before this committee has to be, what are we looking like as a school district? And, unfortunately, we just saw tonight, we have a young lady who's our student representative, applied to Bowdoin, did not get in, was flat rejected. I don't expect every single kid from the school district to go to Bowdoin, but I expect every single kid who wants to go to Bowdoin have a great shot at getting in, and a great shot at going to the school that they want to. And I think that is the school district that we should envision, and the educational opportunities and the educational experience that we should be giving kids. And it was disappointing to hear that. It wasn't a wait list, it was just rejection. So, that's all I got.
You had asked the question, as a district, do we believe that it's a good thing to have 12th graders take AP and IB exams, right? What is your opinion on that?
So I think it's definitely a valuable experience. I mean, it's something we offer. We have many courses, so, you know, I think that many in the high school and in the community would support that as well. The question is, for example, would we want a policy saying for graduation you have to? You know, if you made that policy change, you would put Minichog right at the top of the list, because that's a policy nobody has, right? The question is, you know, how far do we want to expand that number,
Right,
right?
but when you asked the question, you said regardless of this ranking, if we believe it's a good
That's right.
thing, should we
That's right.
support it? Do we believe it's a good thing, and then how do we need to support it? Like you said, subsidizing the exams, I wrote a note down here to maybe reach out to Watt, the Wilbraham Academic Trust, but I was told, I guess, they're not necessarily interested in helping kids subsidize exams, but we can find some other options. But is that something that we should pursue in your eyes as superintendent?
I think what we should do is talk to the students to find out what they say the barriers are. You know, one of the things that I mentioned in my list was providing flexible scheduling. That was because I had heard from Principal Hale that some seniors have said, if you could have a study hall if you took an AP course to help with the work, that might be more interested in taking it. I do think that probably if the district subsidized the test, that you would increase the participation there. And so I think, you know, really it's something where, again, in part we can try to create some demand by making sure that students know that if it's something they want to try, that there won't be barriers, that we will remove the economic barriers, that we will work with them on scheduling if we can work with them on scheduling. But, you know, I think I would be not in favor of going so far as to say, well, let's make it a graduation requirement, say that every student has to take it.
One extreme or the other.
Right.
The last thing I want to mention on this is, since I started on the school committee, I've been encouraging the administration to come up with their own formula, okay? This is what we're going to, this is how we're going to judge ourselves based on this. Like, for example, how they have, you know, 30% on this, 40% on this, you know, and such like that. So then we can take that data and we can rank ourselves to Minichog of the past, to other schools in the district. We can say, are we getting better as a district each year, or are we not getting better as a district each year? What are the things that we need to focus on based on our own formula? And then if we want to compare ourselves to other schools in the area using our own formula, we can do so. But instead of saying, hey, listen, we're going to let U.S. News and World Report, let them decide the formula, it's going to always put us at a disadvantage unless for some reason we shine on that. But I don't think that this report here is reflective of our community as a whole. So why do we keep using things like this to measure ourselves? Why don't we create our own thing to measure ourselves? Measure ourselves against past years, measure ourselves against identical school districts and such in the area.
So thank you for those comments. That is essentially what I was talking about in my MCAS presentation. I think that's where you do. I mean, there you have a unified standard. It's not based on choices. Everybody has to participate, so you get a score for every student. It's the same test, so it's a standard mark that everyone is hitting or not hitting. So I appreciate those comments. I also appreciate Dr. Bontempi's comments. I wanted to just point out one thing, though. It's actually more than 10%. It's based on the diversity of the school, because you have that 10% underserved population, and then you have 20% that's the state assessment performance, which is based on the difference between how you performed and what they expected you to be. So it's really 30% that's based on diversity.
So again, though, I would counter that with, you know, based on the schools that are ranked above Minichog, 165 schools that are ranked above, you know, I'm looking through those districts and I'm finding, you know, a lot of towns that probably have a similar, you know, ethnic makeup to the Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District. So I'm not going to hold that up. The bigger question that I have, and I mean, this is maybe something that, you know, I guess it depends if we want to chase rankings. is, number one is like, what is the proportion of students at Minichog that go to college versus the number that do armed forces or, you know, go into the workforce? But then, second of all, is what is that compared to other school districts in our area to give us an idea, a benchmark as far as, you know, do we have a greater proportion of students going into vocations than East Long Meadow or Long Meadow or Agawam or West Springfield? And, you know, and those schools had ranked above us on this. So I want to know, you know, if we have a similar proportion of students that are going into the workforce. And the next question to ask is, what is the variety of AP offerings, and how is it that they're actually able to expand their AP offerings? And again, our job as a school district is to educate students. The goal is not to put everybody into Harvard, but the goal is that if you have a student who wants to go to Harvard, that they should receive an education that is robust enough in this district that they should be able to go.
So that is information that's available from the state, at least for our district, that I'm able to obtain. I'm not sure if I can obtain it from other districts, but I can try. That might be something for a future school committee meeting, since we're kind of clearing out our ranks. And that might be a more impactful measure, you know. Having an AP class says that as a high school student you have an experience, it's equivalent to a college class. But it doesn't say whether you actually know in college or not when you're there. So that might be something we want to take a look at in terms of getting another picture of how we want to assess our effectiveness.
I don't know what colleges are doing these days, but I do know when my own children went through in the child, they had a lot of, they went through a lot of AP courses, and particularly in math, and it was because they wanted to be able to go to their college and skip that course freshman year. And ended up being able to skip anything because the colleges said, we don't care what you got for degree, we're giving you our own placement test. If you do okay, then you can skip a course, but if you come under that level that we're looking for, you can't. So I think there's probably a segment of the population that's pretty large that says, why are we spending the money on the AP course and on the AP test when there's no payout?
That is a challenge that Principal Hale was talking to me about. Your child's experience was not unique. There are many colleges saying, you know, you have to take our course anyways. So that, again, I mean, that's why I framed it in the context of an educational market choice. It's like, does it have the value that it once did when you could actually save money by passing classes in high school? Although I did want to sort of take that as a segue just to recognize that Principal Hale is here. If you want to talk to anything about this.
I got some thoughts.
Come on up, Steve.
So John, before he goes a little bit to Bill's question, the U.S. News and World Report's been the news a decent amount this year for two different reasons. I believe it's Columbia was found to have artificially inflated some of the statistics that they have, which allowed them to have a higher ranking. Following that, I believe it was Harvard, Yale, and Cal Berkeley Law all chose to remove themselves from the U.S. News and World Report ranking because they felt that they unfairly discriminated and that there were significant equity concerns. So I would say whether we chase ranking or not, and I'll get to my feeling about chasing ranking, the U.S. News and World Report should 100% not be something that anybody aspires or chases when we pay attention to what we're seeing in the news live. I think there are very few people in the legal community who argue that Harvard and Yale are not probably the top two, if not two of the top three law schools out there, and they are choosing to leave this for many of the reasons that you raised. So I don't know why we don't pay attention to it. As far as the question on what matters, do our students want paid exams? I think we probably go off the data that Steve did. I think it was 4 years ago. So yes, if everyone recalls, we did have a request from the student body at Minichog to subsidize the AP exams. We attempted to put it into the budget. I believe it was 4 years ago. It was ultimately removed from the budget. The reason the students requested it is what you found in smaller concentration of students that were taking 2, 3, 4 AP classes and 2, 3, 4 AP exams. And so the financial burden did become a little bit problematic. And when we look at the overall direction of where we're going, what we found, I recall, when we looked at the area, is we had a higher passing rate. So I believe in comparison at that point in time with months in high school, people were questioning why months in high school had more students in AP classes. However, when you look at the data, we had more students achieving a 3, 4, 5 that were taking the exam. So taking an AP class, okay, to your comment of making it a graduation requirement, I think what's most important is what does the student gain from that class? And that 3, 4, or 5 would indicate that they have gained what AP has needed to be a passing score. So that would be, if you're going to look at it, I would think where the focus would be. But to your question, what do we want? I think it's exactly what you said. We want every student in this district to have the ability to pursue whatever it is that they want. So if it's a student gaining admission to the school that they're looking for, if it's a student that's joining the armed services, it's gaining the branch, the MOS that they want. If it's a student entering vocation, it's doing whatever vocation they want, where they want to work. That really should be our barometer. That should be our measure of study. That allows it to be student achievement regardless of whatever direction you're going in versus saying we're going to do all AP classes and everybody has to do it, which is not a great use of resources.
So the hard part that I see on that is, you know, like you bring up Columbia and you bring up Harvard, you know, and there are some people that will pay attention to that. I think the bigger question that we have to ask as a, you know, as a school committee, as a community, and listen, it doesn't matter whether you chase rankings or not, as long as we're providing an educational experience. As far as what you had said with the, you know, with taking the AP class at Munson and the proportion of students that were passing the class, again, the rankings that they're looking at is based on college preparedness, college readiness. So that's why they're putting together all of these different things that, you know, they will use to rank how well a school is preparing a child for education after high school. You know, again, this is not my own personal, this is not my own personal beliefs. I just want to know, like, where we're going as a district and how we're going to balance the two with such an appetite for vocational training, and at the same time wanting to maintain the educational excellence of the district, so as to be able to take our student representative and have her gain admission to the program. So I'll turn it over to Steve.
Can I ask a question? So this test, this was only taking into consideration 12th graders, but we have a good portion of students in other grades that are taking AP courses as well, which wouldn't be part of this ranking. Yeah.
Remember, the methodology is applied equally across
Sure.
all schools. So it's not like we're being disadvantaged. We're not disenfranchised because everybody's being ranked the same way.
Sure.
Right. So yes, we do have undergraduate students or underclass students that do take AP classes, but so do other schools.
Right.
Yeah, I think with what Bill was just talking about, the dichotomy of vocational interests and looking at AP scores. There's a couple of things I can say about that. First of all, I think the committee needs to answer the question, what do you value? Do you value 12th graders taking AP exams? Because 60% of this ranking is based off of that. If you value that, then let's make some policy. I was here 2 years ago explaining the same AP, but there has not been any change in what support or policy changes the committee has made. There's been no support to subsidize students taking the test. In the last 4 years, Handle Wilbraham families have sent over $130,000 to the college board. I also remember a time in this district when the committee was very much against the Common Core because they didn't want government to be controlling the curriculum of the local district. you are giving, if we give this value and we chase this ranking, you are giving an awful lot of power and authority to the college board. And I think you should recognize that. We need to, if we want to encourage 12th graders to take AP tests, we can do that. We need to subsidize it. We need to provide funding for staff to go to AP institutes in the summer. We need to provide funding for staff to run AP study sessions like they do in other school districts on Saturdays and Sundays and at night. We can do that, but that is all about a test. Everything that happened tonight before this discussion is not represented in these rankings. The band that performed, the middle school chorus concert last night that I was at, the high school chorus concert the night before. Everything that Molly Brewer reported on that's happening at Minichog is not represented in this report. What do you value? The districts that you mentioned, I'm not going to name them by name because I think it's not right for anyone to talk about another district because we don't know their story. But just without naming them, 58%, 41%, 41%, and 62% of those districts that you mentioned, that's their passing rate on the exam. Is that where we want to be? Is that what we value? Have the 12th graders take it? We don't care the rate that they pass? Our passing rate is 86%. What do we value? Some of those districts' graduation rate, 74%. Is that what we value? It is a difficult conversation to say, we want a comprehensive high school that provides great opportunities to all types of kids. Music, art, AP, pathways for vocational, all those things. Speaking of vocational, now that I have my pulpit, I'm not sure who the representative is to Lower Prairie Valley, but do you know that next year our kids, as a founding member, will have the same chance of getting into the shop of their choice as a district who is not a founding member? So for example, South Hadley is not a founding member. Their kid will have the same opportunity as our kid, and our kid may not get in. So if we're talking about providing vocational opportunities, that is a policy change that hurts our district as a founding member of the collaborative. We do not believe that the U.S. News and World Report is something to ignore. But I do not believe it should be something that we should dedicate policy change to try and increase our ranking. Any decision that we make today will not come to fruition until 2 years from now. Everything Molly Brewer talked about, all the experiences that we've had this last week, they're not in that report. And that's part of our district's experience. No, go ahead.
Can you elaborate on that LPVC change? So what's changed?
Good.
Okay. So I attended a meeting just this week with the Principals Council for the Collaborative, and what they have done is changed their admissions process, which essentially over the past year or so, they have wanted and encouraged all districts, ours has not been one of them, to start sending students in grade 9. Minichog sends in grade 10. And that's been our past practice. What they've done and what they are citing is that the change of the mandated curriculum for each one of the programs that they offer in the collaborative is now necessitating that students start in the 9th grade And so priority for admissions will be given to students entering in the 9th grade. So not ours that are currently entering in the 10th grade. So for us to make that shift and try to go down to the middle schools, and now a larger share of that burden is now at the middle school level, to identify with a 13-year-old which type of high school program they would like to pursue. That work, it has to shift, but know that even as a founding member of the collaborative ourselves, we don't, on those 9th grade slots, we don't get precedence in any way. So everybody that is a contributing sender to the collaborative, the admissions, as far as it goes, is, as it was described in this meeting, is applications as they come in will be put into a bin. Those that are filled out completely will be looked at. Those that are not will be notified that it's an incomplete application. And they also noted they don't ever want to tell a student, no, you can't come here. But the large numbers, this increase in their population has risen significantly. So that's some of the disadvantages that we're at here. So our current sophomores who were, as a freshman, coming to that conclusion that, yes, I want to go to C-Tech starting my sophomore year, that's not going to be a problem for this particular cohort.
Some additional things that you'll see in the program of studies, which are interesting to note, we're going to have to change our graduation requirements for C-Tech students in order to get them through the diploma for 9th to 12th grade. And that takes into account what the collaborative competencies. So, for example, if you're a shop with landscaping, they have standard competencies for physical education. And we will be counting some of those competencies towards the graduation requirements. We're going to be proposing an AP course for freshmen as an opportunity. That sounds great, doesn't it? That will not be represented in this data. That will not even be represented in the state data. That will not even be represented in the College Board's data. All of the state of Massachusetts and the College Board's AP data is in grades 10, 11, and 12.
What's the class?
Human geography.
Human
Geography.
Human
Excellent.
geography.
Be an opportunity for
Human
freshmen.
geography, as opposed to
Just
horse
plain
science
old
geography?
Map geography. It's not just about the placement of land masses and that. It's human geography, so it incorporates.
But I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. Like,
Oh, no.
again, you know, you
We're
have a,
doing it because it's the right thing for kids.
well, you have a kid that's in 9th grade, and it's like, okay, you know what, I've got career, I've got college. You know what, like, I wonder what college is like. I wonder, what if I took a higher level course that had the same pay, scope, and rigor that a college course would have, to be able to say, you know what, this is not for me. Like, I think the trades would be more interesting. But getting back to a couple of things, Steve, just to close the loop on it. You had talked about, you know, 60% of the ranking being set on the scores, right? And, you know, again, every school district is ranked the exact same way. And you talked about the pass rate being, you know, much lower at those schools. However, again, like, using your data, I can understand why those schools would be ranked higher in terms of college readiness. Because if they have a greater percentage of their students who are taking the course, regardless of whether or not they pass, that at least gives a greater percentage of their students the idea of what college is like. So, to your point, I think their methodology definitely works to adequately measure that. I do take umbrage with the Common Core thing only because when we talk about the Common Core state standards, they were so abysmally inadequate that even Sandra Stotsky, who wrote the Massachusetts frameworks, called the Common Core state standards a joke, and she wouldn't approve them. And then, you know, again, getting back to the testing, you know, there is a book out there called The Power of Two. And it talks about, you know, the value that we have in having a student taking a class like that, and even though they don't pass the exam, they get a 2 on the exam. You know, it is an experience for them, a valuable experience to understand. What do I value? You know me. You've known me for a long time. I value quality education. I think it is the most important thing as a school district that we need to provide our students. Be it in vocational training, be it in pre-college training, but we have to be committed to high-value education, to high-quality education. That's my value. And whatever we can do to provide that is what, not only what we should do, it's what we are tasked to do. It's our responsibility. And and finally, one other thing, with regards to the budget, because we did talk about having those funds come in, and as you know, our discussions with finance, as soon as we talk about increasing dollars for anything like that, I mean, they pucker up tighter than a snare drum. So, we probably wouldn't look to that to get money. There are other ways in which we might consider doing that. Sean and I had talked at one time about sponsoring, doing town-wide sponsorships and having people in town sponsor kids for their AP sessions. But so I think that should be the value for everybody. And then what we need to do is figure out how we're going to do that.
So just writing on some of those comments, one of the things that I think is clear is that I would be in support of anything we can do to subsidize tests for kids who want to take them, if that's a barrier. Because again, I think if a student wants to challenge him or herself, we should do everything we can to let them challenge themselves. To me, that's different than trying to artificially create a market or induce students to hand their money over to the college board. Another thing that I think we can do to help students, as you said, see a wider horizon or challenge themselves to do things they might not otherwise do, would be to experiment with embedded honors, which is one of the things that Principal Hale and I have been talking about. So I know that there are some teachers at the high school who want to try some embedded honors courses. So I hope those come in the program of studies this year. It would be a way of giving students a way to see what honors work is really like, and hopefully get more to try to challenge themselves to that level of excellence than would otherwise be the case if you have to make the choice before even knowing what you're taking.
Thank you. We will certainly add this to a future agenda item as well. We will continue with the international. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
So we'll continue with the international exchange program.
Okay, so there are really 2 types of international exchange programs, and they're known by the type of visa that students get. I have experience with both of them and can speak to both of them. The first is the J1 visa. That's a program that's supported by the Department of State, primarily for the purpose of cultural exchange. There are no paid host families. Typically, students come with a sponsoring agency, and the agency seeks to volunteers for people to, usually families in the community, to host students, and that is a part of the experience. It's also meant to be a person-to-person exchange as well as a country-to-country exchange. Public schools may not charge tuition, and there can't be any cost to the individual who's coming over on a J1 visa. The other program is an F1 program that is administered by the Department of Homeland Security. Again, the program goal is cultural exchange, but this one is primarily students who are preparing for higher learning. These are usually students who feel like they're going to go to college or university somewhere in the U.S. and want a year to develop their English and to adjust to the culture before taking on the challenges of college and university. So typically these students are seniors. There is a charge for students coming in an F1 program for paid host families, so there's some stability with that. The regulation is sort of the exact opposite with J1. It says that public schools must charge at least the actual per pupil expenditure, which would be $16,970.87. You can charge more, but that's the minimum, because under the F1 program, the cost is not to be borne by local taxpayers. So my recommendation would be not to accept J1 students based on just the finances of it and some other conversations we've had around finances of students from other communities. I think the F1 is something that, potentially we could look at. I will say this as someone who's been part of it. Having the superintendent and high school principal become employees of Homeland Security is a lot of work. Because essentially what happens is you get notified when students clear the border, they have 48 hours to show up, and if they don't show up in your school, then you're involved with Homeland Security revoking the visa, and you just become inundated with communications, because not only are you getting the information about your students, but you're getting the information about all the students, and so you have to monitor that information. It can work. It definitely has all the benefits of cultural exchange and some economic benefits for schools. So I think if we want to do an international exchange, that's the one to go with. And it just would raise the caution that there is an administrative burden of being part of the Homeland Security apparatus.
Have you looked at any for-profit organizations in this?
I actually have worked with Educatius in the past, which essentially is an agency that supports F1 programs. What they do essentially is develop a profile for your school, and they advertise it all over the world for students who are seeking an experience in high school before starting a hopeful college university experience in the U.S. And I have gotten students that way. They've all been great students. We've gotten money. It does work. I just raise that caution that it is a lot of work.
The reason I ask is I had been an exchange student in my senior year in New Zealand, and that was through AFS. I don't know if AFS is still going on, American Field Service, but it was a great organization. I don't think anyone was involved with Homeland or anything.
I'm not familiar with that program. I think it might be a J1 program, just from the little description you've given it. So you didn't, for example, mention that you were paid to host a student. So right, so it probably was a J1 program.
Any questions? Move on to the school calendar.
Make a motion to approve the school calendar for the 2023-2024 school year.
Second.
I have a couple questions. Is there a reason, if we look to various months, where it's November, so if we look at November 6, 7, and then 10, why wouldn't we move 6, 7 to 8, 9, so that families have an opportunity to have a longer weekend, as opposed to half day, no school, 2 days on, no school?
I don't. Go ahead.
I would venture a guess that it's to prevent absenteeism, right? So that we have kids that, they've got an early release day, and all of a sudden it turns into a dysfunctional day because half of the kids have taken that day off to extend. That's my guess.
And then we do it again in January. So we go no school, 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 early release, early release.
January I can speak to. In an earlier version of this calendar, we had it 11-12 instead of 18-19. We got some feedback from the high school and from the union that moving it to 18-19 would be beneficial. I believe for the turnaround from going from first to second semester to line that up. I don't know the answer for the 6th and 7th. I think we may have been following prior calendars on that.
So every other year would be an election, but this year would not be an election. So that's why you could look at that. And then the last question I have, so I can see on the early release days, what is the ending time for Green Meadows on a regular day, and what is the ending time for Wilbraham Middle on a regular day?
On a regular day, Green Meadows is dismissing approximately 2:30. Middle school is on the first wave, so they're dismissing just after the high school be, you say 2:15?
I think Green Meadows actually dismisses about 2:45, similarly to,
Sorry,
you
yeah.
know, just that.
So what I'm trying to understand, if you look at a regular early release day, and if you were to take a 6th, 7th, or 8th grader at Green Meadows, they're receiving a shorter academic day than a 6th, 7th, or 8th grader at Wilbraham Middle School. So if you multiply that out, if that stays true across 180 days, you're taking away X amount of education time from the 6th, 7th, 8th grader at Green Meadows compared to the 6th, 7th, 8th grader at Wilbraham Middle.
That's true.
Wait, that's on an early release day?
So that's what I'm trying to understand. Does that carry through? So is the 6th, 7th, or 8th grader receiving less academic time if they're at Green Meadows than they are at Wilbraham Middle? On an early release day, if that carries true for all days, there is that starts to add up. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, it does. And you're right, because they follow an elementary schedule. So I'm trying to think if there's a way to resolve that.
Probably isn't because of buses.
Pardon?
Probably isn't because of buses.
I know we don't have enough buses to get the kids home as it is now, but you're right, it is an inequity.
This is not the first time that we've had this discussion either. Back years ago, when we were talking about time on learning, especially when the students were still at TWB, they were running an elementary school bell schedule and at TWB. So they were running 50-minute periods, whereas Wilbraham Middle School was running 70-minute periods. And so there was obviously a big disparity. I mean, this is a much smaller disparity than that, but that was huge. But I mean, it was based strictly on the student population because at the time, TWB was grades 4 to 8. So
But they're starting at a different time. That's they're starting earlier.
So what you're saying is that if we were able to unify 6th, 7th, and 8th graders all in one building, then the disparity would come down. Might be what I'm hearing you correctly.
Can you explain that? 'Cause I'm not sure I understand.
Sure. Well, I don't know if the way that I see it is WMS starts earlier, gets out earlier, Green Meadows starts a little bit later, gets out later. All of the half days, the early release days are pre-K to 8, so it would include WMS and Green Meadows. Yeah.
Their start and stop time doesn't matter. It's how, so what is the day, right? So if you look at that, that's at 7:40 to 11 o'clock. So if you look at what they're getting 20 minutes as opposed to Green Meadows, when if you look at it, they're just getting 15. Right, 8:30 to 11:45, they're getting 15. The other one's at 7:40 to an 11. So you've got a 5-minute difference for every early release day. If you were to take that 5-minute difference across 180 days.
But it's only on early release day.
But it's only on,
That's what I'm asking, that's what I want to know.
it's only on 5 days.
Yeah.
So it'd be 20, if you have 25 early release days, it's 25 minutes.
Well, I don't know.
25 minutes
That's what I'm
a
asking.
year.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking the end time. So what are the end times on a regular day? Because if it's 5 minutes every single day,
I see what you're saying. So you're just asking.
Yeah, I think it is, there is a difference in the length of the day, the number of minutes for elementary versus middle.
so is it a 5-minute difference every day? So we've got to take a look at that because we shouldn't have some 6th, 7th, 8th graders receiving more in theory time on learning. It's not as egregious as what you were referencing with TFB, but that's a challenge right there.
So that's something that we could look at in terms of restructuring the the bus, because I don't know what it would mean for collective bargaining.
I can answer that question.
Okay.
It's fine from a collective bargaining standpoint, because if you look at the hours from the negotiation 2 rounds ago cover, and it changed from set time to a time of day, and so it's completely covered with collective bargaining.
So this is really about the calendar. One thing we could do is, if you're agreeable with the dates, pass the calendar now so that people don't have vacations, and we could work on adjusting the time, come back to that as a future school committee meets.
I'm fine with it. Yeah.
And all in favor, vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Thank you.
All right, so guys, a couple items. I think John and I will tag team them a little bit. But at the school committee meeting of November 17th, I provided some summary information in regards to separation costs paid by the district for the fiscal 22 school year. To my understanding, the school committees requested a more detailed breakdown of separation costs for individuals as a follow-up. All salary and wage information of district employees is a matter of public record. However, I try to provide summary information first when it might serve the purpose you're looking for. So I try to respect people's privacy in doing so. So the intent was absolutely just to provide you the information you thought you were looking for. However, in your packet at this time, you have a full detailed breakdown for your request. Please bear in mind, if you read my memo of November 17th, these separation amounts do represent legal and contractual obligations of the district. So these are amounts by either contract or state law that we have to pay. By virtue of them being contractual, they are legal matters, so one and the same. You also do, to follow up, I think, on another item that was requested, you have a copy of our standard letter to employees who separate from the district. You'll note that it does include a link to our exit survey document. We are actively collecting data. At present, we have 5 total respondents. That began this summer, so we started that July 1st. You don't typically get huge response rates from this sort of thing. It doesn't really, 5 responses doesn't really represent a viable sample. It's statistically fewer than 1 per school we have. But we are collecting data and we are looking at the data anecdotally as it arrives. So when we get comments, when we get feedback, we do consider that data.
What's the percentage of people who actually fill out the survey versus how many people we have leaving?
I would have to look at how many people who left the district since July 1st. I don't have that data. So we would,
I can tell you it's a small proportion.
yeah.
5, 10, 20, 30?
I would say it would be generous to say it's 10%. Summer has a pretty large turnover just by virtue of summer. It's the nature of our business. So we have a fair number of people leave over the summer. 5 is pretty small. But again, I think it's typical of surveys of this nature that really are only getting people who really want to respond.
So I did, just for the committee knowledge, ask Aaron before the meeting about the severance in the description, because I'm unaccustomed to a world where you're providing severance to someone that voluntarily.
I'm sorry, I can't quite hear you.
Sorry, I was letting everyone know that I had asked Aaron because I was surprised to see severance that we were paying, because typically you don't pay somebody severance that voluntarily exits. And so Aaron did share that some of it has to do with that's where sick time gets paid as opposed to vacation buyback if someone's here for a larger period of time. However, some of the folks that are receiving pretty healthy sums of money were here for a lot less than 6 years. And just curious if you could share it for us in the future, what all fits under the severance bucket, so that we can be good stewards of.
So there are
money here.
the two major buckets here. So there is severance and vacation buyback, and one of the things to share is we really collect this data is specific to an item that DESI asks for in the aggregate. They don't ask us to parse the two items between severance and vacation buyback as per this. So I'm not 100% certain that when we call something severance, it was exactly severance, and if it's labeled vacation buyback, I'm not 100% certain that it was vacation buyback. Usually if it's vacation buyback, it's vacation buyback. But there are two contractual provisions, or rather one's contractual, one is law. Severance is a contractual provision we have in our contracts with many individuals. Individuals who stay with the district 10 years or more and retire from the district are paid 1/6 of their accrued sick leave. So our staff can accrue up to, in many cases, 240 days of sick leave. So if they were to retire after at least 10 years with the district, they would be paid out a full 40 days for that time. So that's the severance piece. Vacation.
And that's my question. So we have multiple folks in here that are non-retirees, not with the district more than 10 years, and they have severance numbers next to their name.
I would have to look at the individual case.
And I'm not-
as I said, something may have been mislabeled, so something that was vacation buyback may have been labeled as severance.
Okay.
I'd have to look, because we're not in the practice of parsing this out like is being asked for at this moment. And in terms of our reporting to the desk and our financial reporting, it's traditionally just reported as one item. So the two items have never been important to us, specifically in the past. So if in the description they were mislabeled, it was just a matter of something that no one's ever asked for before, or asked us to separate. If you had a specific case, I could look into more detail. I'd rather not to get into individual names here. There may be cases where...
so it could just be mislabeled, it could be vacation buyback. It could be mislabeled, it could be...
It could be mislabeled. Something could be
Gotcha, perfect, thank you.
Again, this is not typically been intended for reporting purposes, that description. So... if we are okay with that, I've noticed a lull. I'm going to turn it over to John, who's going to share some information on House of Joy.
Sure. Before I get to the House of Joy, I just had a thought about our prior conversations. I wanted to throw that out about. I do think we should talk about it at a future meeting. I think the number we really need to focus on is time on learning. And the reason I'm thinking of that is because of my experiences being in the middle school. There's a lot more passing time at the middle school than there is at Green Meadows. I mean, Green Meadows, you're essentially walking across the hall and you're in your classroom. At WMS, you have 6 periods a day with 3 minutes passing time, so that chews into the difference there. So, but we'll bring more back on that. Okay, so I was also asked to provide some information on what we're doing to address staff morale. And so I'd like to introduce you to another one of my Bibles. You know, I have my strategic plan Bible and I have my policy Bible. This is my well-worn Leading Together Bible, which is a collection of practices that I've been training and been working a long time to try to perfect and teach others to do. And so instead of just talking about it, I want to introduce you to what it's all about in an experiential way by sharing a practice with you. You have on the screen now a poem called May This Be a House of Joy. Let me tell you why you're looking at this. It's one of the practices from Leading Together, and it's something that was used quite recently right here at Sewell Road School. A few weeks ago, as she was preparing for the December faculty meeting, Principal Parsons called me for a consult. She had gathered some information from staff about their hopes for the year at her first faculty meeting, which would have been the November faculty meeting, and was wondering how I could guide her to take the conversation to the next level. So I asked her to share some of the information she collected from her staff, and after hearing a few of the reflections, I replied, well, your teachers are basically telling you that they want to be happy. We have a protocol for that. It's called the House of Joy. So, through the chair, I wonder if I could ask someone to volunteer to read this poem aloud.
May this be a house of joy. May we be open here to dreams and to each other. May all who enter in these magic walls feel love and feel respect for learning and for each other. May we be always friends to life. May we walk in that friendship. May learning live in this house. May it never leave.
Thank you. So, using these practices, that's how you open a faculty meeting. And that's how the December faculty meeting was opened at Sewell Road. And then, instead of talking about schedules or some of the other things that typically happen in faculty meetings, go through reflection questions. And so, again, I'm not going to do them all, but I really would like to direct your attention to the final question here and ask, just throwing it open to the committee, if anyone has any thoughts about what it would look like if our school, and even our school committee meetings, embodied this poem.
Well, we had a great example of that tonight, didn't we? With the children up there very enthusiastically playing a bunch of different tunes they learned for the first time in front of a group of people. We had a bunch of people, we had to pull out extra chairs. We had a bunch of people who wanted to witness that. And then as soon as it was over, we left Sarah and Georgina, sitting there alone. So if we could carry that joy into meetings more, I'd like to see more people here. But, and then like the concert at the middle school last night and at the high school, what was it, 2 nights ago? Right? So it's those things, I think, are a good example of joy.
Thank you for that. Anyone else have any thoughts they'd like to share?
So the last time that we met here as a committee, it led to police being at the next meeting.
Yeah.
It led to some interaction in the parking lot. So I would say that I don't know that we have got to a point that we can say we embody this poem. However, I'd say we are on a much better journey than we were. And kudos to you, kudos to Michelle. Thank you for the leadership and guidance in helping us get there.
Thank you. So let me share with you what happened when this was actually done at Sewell Road. So here are some work products from that faculty meeting, and I'm sharing them with permission. The graph isn't the work product, but the pictures are. So I love that Sewell Road staff put trust at the top of their joy graphic, because Leading Together is based on a large study of student achievement in Chicago public schools during their decentralization efforts in the 90s. Much of this research can be found in the Bright and Schneider book, Trust in Schools, a core resource for improvement. What they found was that in a decentralized structure, student achievement dramatically increased in about a third of schools, and it dramatically decreased in about a third of schools, and it didn't change much at all in the other third. So obviously, decentralization wasn't a panacea, but they wanted to know what was different about the schools that got better as compared to the schools that got worse. And what they found was that achievement increased most in schools where relational trust among staff increased most. So that's what this shows. This is their actual data from the 1990s. It's looking from 1991 to 1997. The white bars are the low trust schools, and the black bars are the high trust schools. And you can see quite a dramatic difference. And that eventually led to the Leading Together program, which seeks to intentionally improve student achievement by building relational trust among the adults in the school. So I have some more to share with you. This is another product from that meeting. And I love this poster because it depicts listening as the path to staff feeling supported, heard, and respected. And a core concept in Leading Together is the idea of hearing others into speech. On the left, you can see some more modern research. This is from the early 2000s. This is on the characteristics of low turnover versus high turnover schools. And relational trust, again, turned out to be one of the discriminating factors. The research went a little bit farther to highlight some of the impacts of high turnover on the instructional program, on professional development, and the quality of teacher collaboration. The contrast is clear. When trust is low, turnover increases, and this makes it hard to move teaching practices forward because you're constantly orienting a lot of new teachers. Whereas when trust is high, turnover decreases and you can develop some momentum as faculty stays with you from year to year and you have fewer people to bring up to speed. Although it can never be zero. And just to let you know, in this study, the average amount of turnover in the schools was 19%. So you're really looking at the difference between schools with less than 19% turnover and schools with more than 19% turnover on an annual basis. So here's some more products. I actually like the one with the penguins singing on the harp there. I don't know why, it just visually is appealing to me. So 3 things I'd like to leave you with in response to what we're doing about staff morale are using evidence-based practices and leading together to foster relational trust. 2, elevating the level of listening in the district so that we can hear others into speaking. And 3, working really hard to create houses of joy.
Does anyone have any questions?
You know, it's interesting. At one of our schools in the past, I remember I didn't know how quite to word it to someone. So, you know, you want your kids to have order, you know, things to be ordered, and to have the kids not be so loud, right? And sometimes that becomes the kids must be silent and obedient, you know, where, you know, very easily you can suck the joy out of a student's day by having them having to be, you must be silent at lunch, you know. And I'll never forget, I was there on the last day before Christmas at this one particular school, and suddenly, spontaneously, and instantly, the kids broke out into Jingle Bells, you know, and it was just so moving and so great that regardless of how much they're told to sit down, be quiet, don't talk, don't do this, whatever, don't talk to your neighbor, don't look, whatever, that joy was still there. And I know that you've seen some massive improvements at that particular school, but I think that, you know, I get it. We want order. We get it. You know, we don't want crazy noise because there's kids studying in another room, but at the same time, we don't want it to be a punishment, right? So joy is a perfect place for it.
So, safeguard update. So we are in the process of scheduling safeguards with Ken Lett, GenieCon, and Ken will be reaching out to building principals to begin that process and start scheduling those hopefully in January. The intent is then for Ken to have follow-up conversations with each building administrator, and we're going to, we just talked today, so I'm just sort of updating my thoughts really quickly. We're also looking at how we're going to read those results into our capital planning request process. You know, we have a number of items on our capital plan that are, for example, safety related. So when we talk about communication systems, camera systems and things like that, and we're, you know, really pursuing how do we, A, have buy-in to that, for that on a district level, for some of those initiatives, whether those are specifically the initiatives or not that come out of things, but then how do we establish sort of the buy-in and the backing to really be able to push those within towns as priorities, right? We're competing against dump trucks and things like that, and how do we, sort of use some of that feedback to try to get further up the priority list, and at least make sure that those are represented and brought forward. We're also kind of taking the opportunity to review the protocol. So as Ken speaks with principals and other building administrators, he's going to be thinking about how we might update our protocols. So the safety audit protocols in a post-COVID world, right? So we've learned a lot in COVID. What are our priorities? Have we addressed some of the things that were once issues, like oily rags in closets, and maybe it's time to start dealing more with health and safety as a focus, and some of the provisions we're doing for health and safety reasons in a post-COVID world, or a sort of wherever we are with COVID world, we're not sure where we are now. So we also have some historical provisions that were suspended during COVID that we may want to revisit and enhance a little bit more. So that's sort of where that's at. Once we have some feedback from those, we'll bring them back. To that end, we are also finalizing our plans to address the second floor railings at Minichog. So we obviously have encountered some issues with those railings. We've been working with a design engineer as well as Ken Millette, so they've been back and forth a few times over exactly what an enhancement will look like. We want it to be functional, but we also want it to fit the aesthetic and be practical to the best degree possible. So that's taking a little bit of work. We believe we have the proposed design. We've played with some different curve models, dealing with the high tension glass, and we've kind of ended it at a straight up and down model with some prevention for people sort of reaching up and over. We do believe Ken agrees that will provide adequate measures, and we're expecting a formal design proposal including a full cost estimate by early January. If you look at the capital plan, I think the number I have on that capital plan isn't too far off where we're going to be. I think I have 120,000. I think it'll be in that range, give or take.
The safety audit, is that going to be Ken leading a group through the schools?
Say hi.
Just kidding.
Ken is going to be working with the principals. So the idea is that the building administrators have the protocols and they'll be working with the protocols, but Ken will be there to support them. So the goal is eventually to pull Ken out, so he's not leading all of those, and that we are able to do our own safety audits internally without his help.
My experience with safety audits, I found it, if you invite someone from capital planning in both towns along with the audit, it gives them some context for what we're asking money for.
Okay, we can look at that.
That's a great idea.
It may not be something we can do this year, but we can add it in as we go next year. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Go back to you for the rate writer position.
So this has been an item of future school committee business for as long as I've been here, and folks have asked my thoughts on it. Where I come down on it really is, if we're going to do the position, then I think it's important that this not be someone who just writes grants, because as someone who's worked near business offices but never in a business office, I know the amount of work that goes with managing grants. Every one of them has financial reports, and some of them have programmatic reports that need to be done as well. So I think if the committee is interested in having a grant writer position, I think it would be fine to experiment with it, and then we know whether or not it will work. I don't think we actually will know there's any practical way to know unless we hire a person. But I think it's really critical that, that we write a job description that makes it clear that the person will be responsible for helping with some of the administrative oversight of managing the additional funds that they bring into the district.
So the first thing we would need to do is create a line item in the budget in order to fund that position. And the second thing is I had read in your email that you were looking at an initial position of like 12 to 18 months. And the question that I have is there anybody out there who's worth getting that is going to commit to a 1.5 year contract? And I think that's a discussion that we've had at the budget subcommittee level for years. Is, you know, if you're going to attract somebody of quality, you need to commit 3 years.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to leave their position to come here for, you know, a 12-month stint, only for us to say, yeah, you know, we're not really interested. So it would be great if we could. I don't know if you know somebody out there that's really qualified and a great grant writer and is willing to, you know, go on a short-term contract. I think that's probably the biggest obstacle that we have. We had tried to propose a shared grant writer with the two towns because, as we all know, when it comes to crunch time, those are the positions that usually are the first ones to get cut. And obviously, we want to take things that are, that are not going to directly impact education. So we were hoping to get some buy-in from the two towns. We got kind of meh reviews from I think there were some people that were very excited about it. Wilbraham Finance was like dead set against it.
Yeah, but the Wilbraham Board of Selectmen was
For
it, you know. So again, when I was doing interviews, when we had that list that we divvied up and I was talking to a lot of these grant writers, I did ask them, like, we're thinking of doing like a 12 or 6 month or 2 year or something, position, and none of them looked favorably on that. But a suggestion that did come up was set certain benchmarks. You have 12 or 18 months, to show it. But if you hit these certain benchmarks, then your job is guaranteed. What would that goal be? It's not getting us grants that we already have. It's what kind of what stuff do you bring in additional to what we're already bringing in now, and are they going to be responsible for helping with the grants management of the grants that we have now? Then that changes things a lot too. A grant writer, if you really look at it, that is a person who is bringing money in to a district or a municipality, right? So that's like a sales guy, right? Someone's going to bring revenue in. And I think that the biggest challenge for our districts and for municipalities is to bring money in so they can command, decent salaries, and they can command, oh, you won't give me a 3-year, well, this person's going to give me this district's going to give me a 5-year. So I talked to a lot of people that were part-time, and they were doing, definitely more than their salary, they were bringing in. But the people who were part-time, people who were full-time, people who were full-time into it brought in exponentially more than the people who were part-time. So I would not recommend a part-time, I would say full-time. But I think the talent that you're going to get on saying, hey, we're going to try this for a year and a half, someone's like, no, thanks, I can work here, I can work here, I can work here. This is Western Mass. We don't have a lot of density to have that many talented people in this that you would have in like the Boston area. So this is something that, to say, hey, we're going to do an experiment, I think we're just going to have to, if we do this, we're going to have to believe in it, and we're going to have to find someone that's going to be aggressive enough to go in and get it, but then again, we don't want someone just getting grants for grant's sake. You know, getting a grant that's gonna cost us more to run it than what it is. I mean, you really need someone who can finesse it. And then when I asked them, are there any organizations outside, you know, like MASC or MASS, right? You know, all the superintendents get together and they talk stuff. They said, yeah, grant writers don't get together and talk about stuff because then now suddenly there's competition. Oh, I didn't know about that grant. That's great. I'll go for that too. Now I get kicked out because, you know, you heard from me and you get it. So it is something that every school that I've talked to that had it, they're grateful that they have it. Everyone that I talked to from the Wilbraham Board of Selectmen and the Board of Selectmen that had anything to do with grant writers, they're worth their weight in gold. When I worked in public safety before, when I was working with municipalities that had grant writers, they got so, I mean, they had the best systems put into place because they found the grants to help support that. And the ones that didn't have grant writers, and you know, they have the radios, the 2 cups with the string between them, you know. So it's going to have to be something, a decision that is made by you. I mean, I guess, I mean, we wouldn't force it on you because you're the one that's decided it's something value that you see. But again, bringing someone in that can meet certain goals, pay for themselves plus a lot more, and help us expand our educational efforts. It's not taking money away. It's bringing money to student-facing.
So I think that's very helpful. Maybe my idea of this is sort of biased by my own experience of, you know, developing some grant writers. I think you're right. If you want to poach someone away from another organization, you probably have to offer something more substantial. I didn't even think that would be a possibility, but I think that if you want to, then you're right. But I guess I would just say before I say the downside, let me say, I know that we're facing the end of ESSER funding. There's a fiscal cliff. Everyone is worried about that. And I think, you know, there are strong benefits to trying to be proactive to develop some revenue sources to replace that money when it runs out. And I think that in and of itself may be a reason to do it. I'll say the only downside is if you commit to 3 years, if it's not working out, then you could end up in negative on it. You know, could be up in the negative. But like I said, for me, the main thing is that we make sure that whoever we hire is also able to address the additional administrative work that comes along with it, so that, you know, we're not continuing to overstretch our own staff, our current staff.
I wasn't thinking about developing someone inside. When originally I was thinking of a grant writer, I was thinking of someone that already knew the process, had experience with the process, so we can just go hit the ground running, you know. Because what you're suggesting is something that we've been doing, you know. If you reach out to Gina Khan, and I'm not putting words into her mouth, I'm just, from knowing her, it's like she didn't know about any of this stuff, but she wanted things to happen, so she learned. And when I spoke to her, she's like, well, I only go for the grants on things that interest me,
Right.
you know, which is, yeah, you know, Gina is worth, like I said, worth her weight in diamonds, or gold, whatever, you know, but we need someone who's going to talk to the administration, see what, you know, what we're looking for, what we want. We want grants to replace the pool or fix the pool. All right, I can go and look for grants for that. Or we want something for the musical program. Okay, I know grants for that. Or, you know, whatever the specific is, because that grant writer is going to need your buy-in. So, yeah, it's the only way that we can bring more money in to the district that does not require taxes to be increased or the burdens to fall onto the towns or the state. It is definitely something that can help and benefit us. I have not heard of a grant writer that hasn't pulled their weight. So, but I'm sure the case is out there, but like I said, every time I'm trying to get funding for something and you find a town that has a grant writer, you know, they get the money to you know, get the systems in that you need.
I am on the other side. I think I'm probably the only one on the committee who is. I think it was about a year ago we started talking about this, and I went through the profiles page on DESI just to see who in administration or in anything is administering grants already on their own salary. And it's enormous. There's directors of curriculum who are also grant writers, and it follows like that. My husband was the director of houses for a while, and he walked into a house in Springfield and said, you know, do you have any grants? And I said, we don't have a grant writer, we just have a house manager. And he says, you just became the grant writer. And he does the same thing with South End Community Center. He gets thousands and thousands of dollars. I think we have a talented staff who are already and a very knowledgeable administrator who are already doing grants. And once you do a grant, you have to follow up that grant. Grants, normally, if they're worth a while, there's all, require you to do programs and make programmatic shifts. That comes from our administration. So just getting a grant writer doesn't mean that the administrators don't get extra work. So that's my thinking.
One thought I have about that is it could be a tiered approach. I mean, what you were talking about is what I was basically thinking in my experience of developing grant writers. We could always try and see if we could get someone, you know, like who already does this. And if not, then we could try developing someone as a backup strategy.
What about, can we advertise a position that, depending on the people that we get, if we look at someone and we say, there's nothing interesting here, we don't fill it, or if we get someone that's like, wow, this person's incredible, they just moved to town for whatever reason, I mean, is that another way of looking?
Sure, that happens all the time. You know, we have postings that fail and we repost or we recalibrate because we don't have the pool.
See what talent's out there, and I mean, you don't have to take any steps on it, but just what kind of response are you getting, and you know, and you might say.
We should probably give them some guidance, however, if we're going to ask them to publish. So I think that you know, we may want to reconvene this in a couple of weeks, but if we can, everybody can kind of sit down and visualize in their mind's eye, like, what are you looking for? Because I don't want to just hand it over to you guys and say, let's find it. You know, find us a grant writer. You know, what are some of the requirements that we have for it? And I think we should be fairly specific and challenge ourselves to try to get somebody who is a quality product.
Yeah, and we'd also need some financial guidance because it's not currently in the budget.
I'd also look at how many grants, you know, on average we have done per year over, say, the last 5 years, how much we brought in for grants. And if we brought a grant writer in, would we expect them to double that? Would we expect them to do 50% of that? Would we expect them to do triple that? I don't know. You know, at least see what we've done and how many people's time it's taken to make that, and then from there we can see what the expectation would be. And then, you know, I mean, I'm just throwing out numbers, but let's say they bring in $1.5 million. Well, I'd pay someone $150,000 to bring in $1.5 million a year, wouldn't you? I mean, I guess, I don't know. I'm just throwing out numbers.
So we've had great conversation tonight, so I think this is something that will live on our future agenda item as well. And then we can kind of talk about in greater detail and maybe look at some specifications for the position and we can go from there.
Michelle, can we just go back? I have a question on the safety upgrade. Who's paying for it? Who's paying for the safety upgrade at Minichog?
Who what?
Who is paying for the safety upgrade at Minichog?
Who's paying for the safety?
Who is paying for the safety upgrade
Oh,
at Minichog.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, we're sort of cycling back to that, so I didn't get the context. I don't know. I mean, it will be in our capital request to both towns. So actually, it won't go to either town. It would be part of our budget package to the communities, to both towns. We put forth Minichog's budget. So if you look at the capital plan document I shared last month, it is in there under Minichog. And if you look at all the capital items under Minichog, you know, we're going to have to look at what of those items are our priorities, and then decide how much we want to put forward to the towns for capital. So some of those items, for example, one of those is Chromebooks. I have that covered in ESSER grants for this year. So even though it's on the capital plan, that's not a priority item. We have that covered. But there are other items. I can't remember exactly what's on the Minichog plan right now, but you know, we're going to have to do some prioritizing as we look at the budget.
Has that been
seemed like something that the finance subcommittee, you may want to talk about Monday, because this to me would be a classic use of ARPA funds between the two communities. So we've seen the impact of mental health as a result of the pandemic. We've seen an increase with our students, and that's why it has to occur. So this would fit ARPA all day long, more than some of the ways we're seeing ARPA being applied right now.
Didn't Wilbraham already commit all its ARPA funds
Yeah.
to the senior center?
No, there's still a portion that's remaining. They committed a massive quantity, but there's still a portion that is remaining.
Really?
I think as of this week, I think they
I understood
just
they did.
$50,000 for a parking lot study.
Mark
this
Ducey had told us
would be
that all the funds were gone. He told us that.
He told us that when we were at finance
Yeah.
2 weeks ago. He told us that all the ARPA funds were gone.
Yeah.
As of 2 weeks ago, they were not. So I think I would ask the question, if this would fit in
Great.
category.
I like your answer better.
Yeah.
Now, has this been shared with those committees yet? Like, hey, listen.
The capital plan?
Yeah.
I have sent it to both towns. So you'll recall there was some confusion last year about who got in and who didn't. So it is with the select boards, it's with the town managers, it's with the FinCom, it's with the advisories. They all have the same memo you received with the entire capital plan spreadsheet. I did just receive Wilbraham. Wilbraham has some standard forms they provide us. I'll be working tomorrow with Mike Messier to kind of parse through our requests and prioritize some of those.
In order to cut to the chase on this, I probably would just reach out to Nick Rowe directly
Yeah.
tomorrow and just ask him, what is the status of the ARPA funds in our town? If he says there are funds available, then I would contact, who's the guy in Hammond, I forgot his name. No, Bob Martin. Contact Bob and see if they have funds, because it would really be contingent upon both towns having available ARPA funds.
So this is as of November 1, so I recognize it's dated. In Wilbraham, 4,390,602, and they had committed 2,718,249. I know in the paper, it was this, at the last select board meeting, they committed $50,000 for the parking lot study. So as of, whatever that was, last select board meeting, there was still at least $50,000 remaining, and there was still, prior to that, $1 million plus that was sitting there available. So it may have been used by now, but as recently as last meeting, there was still some money available.
Yeah, I want to say it was at the last meeting or 2 meetings ago, because we had brought up the ARPA funds. He had said that, ARPA was 100% complete.
No, we're meeting with everybody and all the committees and such like that. Bill, did you send that letter out to everybody? Are they knowing about the dates? Did you send out a letter to?
I believe the district office.
So you guys sent the letter out?
It's gone out, yes.
Okay, cool. So everybody knows about this meeting? What's that?
I don't distribute letters.
Oh, okay.
It usually comes through the district.
Okay. So that letter has gone out to everybody?
Yeah, everyone was addressed.
Okay, did we get, any people saying they're coming or anything like that? It's going to be well attended because there's a lot of business for us to review at that meeting, right?
I'm not, I'm trying to recall the text, I'm not sure we asked people to respond in advance. So,
I gave the letter to Michelle, and Michelle made some edits to it, and it crossed my name off the letter and put hers, so I just said, you know what, you take care of it. So I don't know what was in the letter as far as the RSVPs.
So in the letter, the changes that were made, there was no, in the original letter, there was no request for an RSVP. I do believe that last year, Ronnie does, because I remember there were emails asking Ronnie to follow up
Yeah.
with offices to see if, who will be attending.
Right.
But I'm sure that will be happening after the holiday season.
Yeah.
So I don't think we have an RSVP.
No, that's fine, 'cause the first one's in January, right?
January 19th.
January 19th, so we are looking at, 2 weeks after.
So following up after the holidays would be appropriate.
Perfect. Excellent.
All right, so we will continue forward. Any other questions, concerns? No? Okay, we'll move on to old business, and we will discuss the equity audit.
okay, so in your packet, you have equity audit specifications that were developed by the DEI committee that was formed pursuant to the strategic plan. This broad committee, representative of both communities and individuals of all different kinds of identities, reviewed other specifications for equity audits that other districts have put out, discussed them, and came up with this set of work that we felt would be appropriate for the district to do as in response to the call for an equity audit. We then sent the specifications out to 4 vendors who had been pre-approved by, I'm not sure if it's OSD or DESI.
DESI through OSD, they put out an RFQ. So these are companies that are specifically qualified to do it.
So, according to municipal purchasing, which is actually not my area of expertise, the best practice in this case is to send your specifications to at least 3 vendors. We sent them to 4 vendors. The low bidder, if you will, was Mass Insight, which came in at $119,500. We reviewed their proposal to make sure that it was responsive to the specifications that we put out, and it is. And so we didn't go through reviewing the other higher cost responses because this is the one that we should choose based on municipal finance.
Go back to that. But the first question I have is, so do you have a date set up to allow the public the opportunity to interview these companies or to provide any presentations to the public?
No, my understanding is that the way the process works is once you develop your specifications and send them out, your choice is essentially to award it to the lowest bidder or to fail the whole thing and start over again.
No, that's based on municipal finance law. About
Yeah, procurement law. So there's a couple of different options you can choose. As we talked about, I think the DEI group and John and we were talking to, we're not specifically qualified to determine whether one entity is qualified to do an equity audit or not. So the state of Massachusetts, DESI, put out what's called an RFQ. So basically they sought vendors who had qualifications in doing this sort of work. They've developed a list of...
No, I'm sorry, no, we've covered that. The question that I had is that you're taking the lowest bidder, but
yes.
I mean, when we did the superintendent search, we didn't do that.
I can't comment on that. We need to take the lowest bidder in this case.
So, but that was the same municipal law that would apply, correct?
Yes.
Not for the superintendent's search.
Why?
Because that was the guidance we received, because it was under $50,000. We did not have to
put the bid out. We
Doesn't
did.
depend on scope of work. Like the superintendent's.
So I
doesn't
think,
depend on
I'm
scope
going to
of work.
speak to the superintendent search, but I can speak to this. So there are a couple of different ways you can do this. We could write a full RFP, and then we would have had to qualify all of the vendors. Again, which I think the district didn't feel like we were in a position to qualify the vendors, whether they were capable of performing this sort of work. So in going to a pool of qualified vendors, we could then select, request bids from each of them, as long as we choose lowest price based on the specs we put forth. So for example, if the reason we create specs is, for example, if I just put out an RFP for nails, right? I might get framing nails, I might get roofing nails, I might get flooring nails, I might get finish nails, right? And so I need to specify what I want. So those specifications specify in pretty clear terms what we expect this company to do. And as long as they are meeting those specs, we're obligated to go with the lowest bidder, right? So if we had no specs and we just said, give us an equity audit, we could have very, very different understandings of what doing an equity audit means. So now that we've created a set of specs, this is what you're going to do, and now you're going to bid and tell us how much money you need to do that. In that case, we're obligated to the lowest bidder.
Okay. I had a couple of people ask me what the difference between the companies were, and they wanted to have the opportunity to hear proposals from the different companies. And I was kind of curious myself. I read through the proposals. Mass Insight came in as the lowest bidder, but when I was reading their proposal, they plan to spend, I think, a day here, and then everything else is done virtual. So, again, you talk about nails and you talk about the scope of work. I have some serious considerations in terms of like what company we're going to use, what type of commitment we're going to get for the quality of work. Because you give a scope of work, but if you're talking about on day one site and then one day on site and then everything else is being done virtually, whereas some of the other companies there wasn't a specification of that. And I just think that that's something that's extremely important because I'm asking for roofing nails and I'm getting just nails.
Fair enough.
So I'm not satisfied with this, and I would implore us to get more information from each one of these companies, and I think that it would be a very reasonable request to have each one of these companies send a representative out, give a 10-minute presentation, talk about what it is that their experience is, and allow the public the opportunity to ask them questions as well.
So that's where we'd be getting into an RFP process. So we would need to scrap this and then go to an RFP process, in which case, we're the ones determining whether someone is qualified. We would need to set up.
But you already have a list of vendors from the state, correct?
But you were talking before
So
us
if we're
imposing on
judging,
the administration, the administration.
the only way,
We already
recommendations.
the only way not,
Hold on.
yeah, the only way not to use price as a determining factor is to do something more like an RFP, and then you need to create weighted values to how you're going to evaluate each proposal individually. If we're prepared to do that, it's a lot more time. We're going to need to set up all of those weighted values to determine what, and price has to be one of those values, and that has to be the highest score value.
Right. But when I look at these estimates, when we were first talking about doing an equity audit, the prices that we were bantering around were in the $50,000 to $60,000 range. We're literally twice as much money, and
Because we waited so long. If we'd done it 2 years ago, it would have been $60,000 from Mass Insight.
why? So
Now
why is
it's
it? Why is it more?
19,000.
So why is it more expensive?
Why is milk more expensive? Everything, there's inflation, there's more people doing equity audits, so there's more people out there in line for it. So
Well,
So, but in the answer,
I don't think the price is going to go down anytime soon.
no, but in answer to your question, when you talked about, you were always talking about why we're imposing more work onto them. The answer to the question is that the school committee voted in violation of its own policies.
In your opinion?
No, it's
No,
not.
in your opinion.
You can read the policy.
It's in your opinion.
Voted to instruct the school committee, or instruct the administration to do that. So, and I had warned about this from the beginning when we had this debate. I wasn't opposed to the idea of doing an equity audit, however, I was opposed to it being a mandate from the school committee, because the work that they are doing now is stuff that was tasked to them by us. And so we have some ownership in this because there are members of this committee who voted to put this onto them. So by rights, we should take responsibility for this. And if there are constituents out there that have concerns about the fact that this is now 2 or 3 times what they had thought it was going to be, and there are questions about the scope of work, I do think it's incumbent upon us as a school committee to be able to provide transparency to the taxpayers to understand why this is more expensive, what the scope of the project is, and what do we expect to get out of it.
Do you need a motion from us, or are you just giving us information that's what you're going to proceed with?
I think that given the amount of money involved, it would be helpful to get a vote from the school committee to proceed or not to proceed.
I'll make a motion to proceed with the Mass Insight Equity Audit that's dated September 8th, 2022.
So when I look at the Mass Insight scope, there are a few things that are concerning. I'll bring everyone's attention to page 6. Note, the above scope of work was written to align with the specifications released by HWRSD for an equity audit, not Mass Insight's recommended equity audit scope and activities. If we look at classroom observations, they are recommending classroom observations at each of our 6 district schools. One could easily argue that that number should be 7 at the $2,000 to $7,000 per school. There's an extra $42,000 or $49,000 potentially in this scope if the decision is to move forward with that. The other piece is the focus group interview, and they're encouraging that at the tune of another $8,500. So if we say that we only have 6 schools, you're talking about potential for adding $50,500. If you say that we have 7 schools, you're talking about a potential $57,500 added to that scope, which does create some changes to that. The other portion that I also noticed is, and it's consistent through all 3 of them, it is very little in-person time that any of the firms would conduct. So I think that is fairly consistent. However, that price tag is pretty darn scary to me for what we're actually receiving based off of that. I would think if we're going to spend $120,000, I would feel far more comfortable working with the LPDC, DE&I team member, making sure that we're doing things. I thought that we had hired someone in the share. Oh, they left. Okay. Didn't know that individual left. I just think $120,000 is a whole lot of money when we've done very few things ourselves to see if the staff and the faculty have ideas that we could better spend potentially $120,000. That could scale all the way up to $170,000, $180,000 if we would go all in on the Mass Insight recommendations.
I think the only thing I would say to clarify that is accepting or moving forward with this bid doesn't bind us to accepting the recommendations, which I don't actually think we could do because it would make them no longer the low price provider.
You could accept a portion of them. You could accept a portion, or we could cap it at no more than $190,500 if somebody wanted to amend the motion. That would be a way to prevent that.
Amend the motion to say $119,500 is what you're suggesting?
I'm not suggesting, I'm saying that would be a way if somebody wanted to, that you could cap it so that the two recommendations from Mass Insight would not be exercised without coming back to the committee.
Did you see any recommendations in there that you wanted?
No, because I think that you have to bid on specs. You know,
Super.
it's like going to the auto dealer and, you know, you think you have a deal on the car and then people start throwing in options and all of a sudden the price goes up. I don't think we should get into that sort of lump sum.
So there's a motion on the table to amend.
Did you make a motion to amend?
Did you just do it?
No.
No, he did not.
No, I think you
No, I did not.
did. You just
No, you did, I made a motion to amend, it just wasn't seconded.
Wasn't second.
Yeah, so that would say, does anyone?
Did I say
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we need to because he says he's not going to go for anything beyond that anyway.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Bill?
No.
Cheryl? Yes. Sean?
Aye.
Lisa?
Yes.
Patrick?
No.
And myself? Yes. Sorry. Mary, did you hear that?
I have Attorney Sweeney's office is working on a contract now, so I started the process with them, so we'll have that ready for you to sign.
So we will continue. Erin, is there anyone? No. For public comment? Would anyone here, is anyone very interested in making a public comment?
Sorry, can I say something? So the 119,500, we have that in our budget, Aaron?
Aaron?
We have the 119,500 in our budget.
We can take it out of ESSER funds. This is something that's available through ESSER.
But it's not in our budget.
It's not in our budget.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Yeah, when we started this, I indicated that we did have ESSER funds that was.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the subcommittee updates. Cheryl, from the subcommittee. Thank you. Finance and operations subcommittee, Bill?
Not under the law.
Okay, thank you. LBDEC collaborative representative, Lisa?
Yes. Oh. We met yesterday and there was a discussion about how they have the highest enrollment ever in their career tech, and they're considering adding criminal justice as another option for students to take. They did talk about how they've never had to turn down students before, but because of such a high enrollment that they are probably going to have to, but they need to come up with how they're going to choose those students. So they haven't come up with a way to choose which students will attend and which ones aren't. So they said it would be in discussions with superintendents about how they choose students. Currently, some districts have started bringing their 8th grade students on field trips to tour career tech. We're looking for another DEI coordinator, so people are applying again. An electric bus update, they have until April to order buses. Once buses are ordered, it takes about 9 to 12 months for them to be delivered. Currently, they're having weekly meetings to figure out the infrastructure, so they're looking at different types of charging stations and where to place them, where they would be best suited, and then mapping out bus routes that would be best suited for an electric bus, so for distance and terrain, and where the charging stations would be placed. So that's it.
I do have a quick question. You said another DEI officer or a new DEI officer?
The DEI officer left. The DEI coordinator,
Don't we just hired like,
yes, they were still applying to other jobs and they left for another job.
that's what I fear for grant writing. But, and then it's just an interesting thing. So the company I work for, we have at 2 locations in Massachusetts. We have about, was 35, 40 electric vehicles that we have launched, and we've been amazingly successful at that. There are certain criteria. You want to make sure they're at least 80% charged before they go out, and you want them to come back before it gets down to zero. But you know, I envision a time when there are more electric charging stations around where that wouldn't be an issue. So I think this is going to be very exciting for our district.
Patrick, did you have a question? Oh. I have nothing to report for the LDPC Corporation representative, and have nothing to report from the negotiation subcommittee, policy subcommittee, or is not here tonight.
We have nothing new. We do have third readings of policies JBA/JIC, JICFB, and KHA on the agenda.
Motion to accept policies JBA, JICK, JICFB, and KHA.
Second.
Discussion? Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Planning committee? That's the next one. Do we have a status of where we are?
Yes, we do know who the representatives from both communities are. I think the next step in the process would be just to coordinate a meeting.
I would assume in the new year. Okay. Who are the representatives from the town?
So, I'm just,
Terry and Craig, I think.
thank you. Jerry is from Overham, and Mr. Davenport from Henry.
Motion to accept consent agenda.
Second.
Questions, concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
The warrants are on. Did everybody get those?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Cool.
And we will continue with the superintendent's update.
Thank you. Let me begin by reporting on the World Cultures course, which is the last old item on future agenda. I learned this course was created last year at Green Meadows as an alternative to Spanish because it was not possible to find a Spanish teacher willing to work a part-time schedule, and there was an insufficient number of students at middle school to justify a full-time teacher. That course is not running this year, and we still have not been able to find a Spanish teacher for the same reasons as last year. We are currently in discussions with someone who has indicated they may be interested in a part-time position, have offered the Spanish position to others, but they can turn it down because it is not an attractive position, really, and there are lots of opportunities for full-time Spanish teachers. But hopefully we will be able to fill that. The intention is not to continue the World Cultures course that was set at a one-time thing that was created based on the staffing that was available last year. Next, I'll quickly update everyone on enrollment. As of December 1st, the number stood at 2,862. Moving into my entry plan, this week I completed observations of what are traditionally considered to be the early childhood grades of pre-K to 2. The teaching and learning I have witnessed continues to impress me, and I want to share 2 quotes that I gathered during the course of my observations from teachers implementing our new programs. Speaking specifically about the literacy program, one teacher told me, quote, "I know the students are getting exactly what they need." Another said, "The students are all in with the new curriculum." Those statements clearly match what I have seen with my own eyes, and I'd like to take this opportunity to commend our early childhood educators on the work they're doing to provide such powerful learning experiences during our students' time of optimal development. This is going to pay dividends for years. You're going to be really happy about this. On to the strategic plan. As you just heard, the status of hiring a DEIB coordinator was downgraded from completed to in progress when the person selected by the collaborative superintendents left the position after about a month. The position has been reposted and has attracted several qualified candidates. We're in the process of setting up a new round of interviews with the candidates so we can refill the position. The website review and evaluation team met this week to review a website solution called Aptigi. We've also made contact with Wild Apples, as been suggested at the last meeting, and we'll be continuing to talk to them about their services. We hope to make a decision about what direction we want to head in during the next few months, so we'll have the lead time necessary to transition to a new website vendor if we decide that's the best option. We'd really like to make that decision by March, thinking about the amount of work involved in transitioning the website and avoid the cost of running two simultaneous websites in the new fiscal year if at all possible. Next, I'd like to ask Lisa Curtin and Gina Roy to help me with my report by sharing a few words about the professional development provided last week.
Thank you. I'll get started. We had lots of very exciting opportunities on our December 7th early release professional learning day for the pre-K to 8 day. The grade 6 math teachers, special educators, and math interventionists worked with Sarah Bench from Flynn Educational Consulting in an activity called Shifting Toward Thinking Classrooms in Mathematics to support all students. The focus of their work was increasing student thinking and engagement in math and increasing the rigor of the math tasks that students are participating in. The middle school teams at WMS and Green Meadows worked together, or they worked at their own buildings on similar topics. WMS worked on team mission development. They reviewed the vocal survey views of climate and learning that we talked about in the previous meeting. And they did some curriculum mapping work in the content team areas. And Green Meadows had their team meetings and were working on curriculum review and planning as well.
December 7th really offered a great opportunity for our paraprofessionals and our special ed teachers to have specialized training with each other. So our pre-K teachers and paras, they, facilitated by the early childhood coordinator, they worked on a session rethinking circle time, and it was a way to help them to increase support for increasing communication between students during the circle time activities. Our SPED teachers that are assigned to our intensive resource room had a specialized training in ACEs, and it was the company that provided this training, and they helped them with understanding data collection and utilizing the program more effectively. Our intensive learning center teachers collaborated with their paraprofessionals, and they had a training with Hillary Jellison from Communicare to work on unique curriculum and accessing unique curriculum and really creating individualized profiles for all of our special ed students that are in those ILC classrooms. And lastly, our SPED teachers that work with inclusion paraprofessionals worked on the Bridges Intervention Program, broadening their knowledge base on that math intervention, and just discussing individual student needs and supporting them in the classrooms.
Kindergarten paraprofessionals worked on planning and preparation of materials for literacy and math, as well as reviewing upcoming unit resources so they're better prepared to support students and teachers. Grades K through 5, classroom teachers, math coaches, and elementary principals worked on math, unpacking the unit. So what each grade level did was they took a deep dive into an illustrative math unit and identified the desired results of the unit, studied evidence of learning, and examined learning experiences. This was really a team effort. It was planned and facilitated by the elementary principals, coaches, and teacher leaders, and it came, the focus of the activity came from the reflections from K-5 teachers at previous math professional development. We also offered psychological first aid through Riverside Community Care. This training was presented by Dr. Larry Berkowitz and Jordan Fox-Kemper from Riverside Trauma Center. Psychological first aid is defined as the evidence-informed approach to help children, adolescents, and adults and families designed to reduce the initial distress caused by traumatic events and to foster resilience and coping skills. This is connected to what Gina Kahn and Bree presented to us a few weeks ago. It was connected to that. I won't go into all the detail there. Our related arts teachers, PE, health teachers, music,
And art has various activities happening. Our PE health teachers worked on an online course called Connected PE in topics such as teaching games in phys ed to address multiple student outcomes and using mindfulness in PE. The art teachers also engaged in online PD, and they focused their work on cultural competency in the arts. The music teachers at Stony, the elementary music teachers, and the band teachers connected together to collaborate and plan and work on alignment. Our science specialists focused on Project Lead the Way, doing things such as organizing their materials, collaborating on final projects, reviewing their new modules, looking at their budget in the grant to see what else they need to purchase, and developing formative assessments. Our ELL teachers worked on preparing for the access testing, setting it up, training, completing all of the work that they needed to do. We also had an early literacy grant consultation. Our literacy coaches and literacy consultants looked at materials, school calendar. We did receive another grant that we applied for, the early literacy grant. It was a competitive state grant. It's called From Research to Practice, Evidence-Based Literacy. And so the part of the grant pays for consultants to come in to work with our K-3 teachers. So we're doing a lot of planning, creating a calendar, looking at data, and preparing for the next PD that they will be providing in the school visits that they're doing. Very, very, very busy and very productive early day for everyone.
I'd like to make a comment. I went to the curriculum night that you hosted, and the enthusiasm of the teachers represented there was palpable. I mean, you could feel it. And there was one teacher in particular who was, I believe, on death's door, and she was there because it was that important to her, and she was so enthusiastic about it, wearing a mask, and she could hardly talk, but she was just so in on it. So I'm really glad that with the focus of this professional development and getting the enthusiasm and the joy, as we were talking about, back into learning. So thank you both, ladies.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I think that was having the teachers there as the ambassadors of the work that they're doing and be able to share their experiences with the materials, but mostly their experiences with the children and what they're seeing. So thanks for coming.
And so, as I wrap up my final report of 2022, I'd like to end, as I started, on a note of gratitude. This week I became aware of a small donation made by a high school student as part of the Civics Project. And normally you wouldn't be aware because it falls below the threshold that requires school committee approval. But this young man was interested in diversifying the offerings at our high school library, and he was specifically interested in making sure our collection included reading materials related to ADHD, American Sign Language, autism, and Japanese language and culture. And so I'd like to just thank Joseph Hale for your donations to the library and for being true to your school.
Future agenda items?
In light of the update on the lack of the foreign language offering at Green Meadows, can we please have our approach to foreign languages as a district, please?
Continue talks about the values for where we're going as a district educationally. And I would suggest that we try to invite some public comment on that as well. I think Mr. Hale is at some serious crossroads because the truth is there is a big call for vocational training in this district, and we really need to get a handle on where where our proportions are, where our kids want to go, because it's going to determine an awful lot in terms of the programming that we have in grades 9 through 12.
Anything else? Before I have a motion to adjourn, I just want to wish everybody a happy and healthy new year. Hope you enjoy your holiday season. Hope you are able to enjoy some time off with your family.
Here.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Roll call vote. Bill?
Aye.
Cheryl? Sean?
Aye.
Patrick?
Aye.
Lisa? Aye. Myself, aye.